Hi everyone and welcome to Paris Fashion Week. Now I've got a confession to make. Usually I'm in Paris during the shows and it's also my birthday, but this year I've decided to leave Paris, leave Europe behind and come to the tropics. So here I am sat in this gloriously 1980s black leather sofa. It's almost shaped like a giant shell. So I thought we'd do a Paris Fashion Week roundup, and stay tuned because we're going to go through my favourite shows and how to wear the looks in real life.
I'm Aleksandra Olenska, and I've worked as a creative director and stylist for luxury brands including Chanel, Celine and Vanessa Bruno, as well as magazines including Vogue and Harper's Bazaar. And I've been featured in international press including Forbes, Elle, The Sunday Times and The Independent. I now help directors and leaders in midlife and beyond to rebalance that work, busy lifestyle you've become accustomed to, because you know life's too short to stay in that career-driven comfort zone. I help you to redesign and restyle your life, especially at midlife with life-changing transitions such as the breakup of relationship, divorce, menopause, or turning 40 and beyond. From your home and your wardrobe to your mind and social life, I help you with your stylish next chapter to step into your best life, because I know you're ready to rock life again.
So a few of the themes that we're seeing at Fashion Week this season. Remember that fashion is a cultural reflection. Style is how we express ourselves, and fashion is a tool that we can use to keep ourselves elegant and relevant, sassy and classy. So fashion really expresses the zeitgeist, the air of the times. Actually, I'm quite amused that I've subconsciously chosen to put on a black dress today. I remember that brilliant Susie Menkes article. Susie Menkes is a great fashion journalist, one of the grandmas of contemporary fashion journalism. She's absolutely incredible with her famous coiffed bouffant hair. Brilliant writer, and I remember in around 2010, she wrote an article called The Circus of Fashion, and she was describing the changes in the fashion industry, of how all the fashion journalists and the stylists, the fashion folk, we used to wear black to go to fashion shows because it wasn't about us. It was about the spectacle that we were seeing on the catwalk in front of us. It was our job to report, to look at the latest fashions, to see what we'd be using in magazines, on celebrities, what the buyers will be buying for the stores. It's very much an industry, how things have changed. And in this article, she wrote about how now, actually, sometimes the more interesting fashions are seen outside of the tents, where you see all of the influencers dressed up. And to be honest with you, I love the fact that we can dress up or dress down, that we can use fashion to express ourselves in all of our dimensions. And sometimes when we get to midlife, we can sort of have a bit of a wobble with that and think about what do we really want to wear. And looking at those fashion shows, especially at the moment, we've had a real return to the skinny models. There's nothing wrong with being slim. There's nothing wrong with whatever size you want to be. But there does seem to be a return to this very 90s notion of skinny models on the catwalks. We'll talk about that in detail another time. But sometimes that can feel a bit disjointed, especially when you get to 40 and 50 and, our body shape does change. So how can we use the fashion and the trends that we're seeing this season? Are you ready? Here we go. So back in 2008, when we had the financial crisis, we saw fashion returning to austerity. We saw a lot of wartime references with like patch pockets inspired by old war uniforms. And we also saw a lot of return of tailoring, especially within the luxury sector. Now, tailoring is really something that it's much more difficult to do tailoring at a high street level, at a fast fashion level, and do it really well. It's really something that you need to devote a lot of time and sampling to get it to look sharp and beautiful. The high street is doing better and better tailoring. The fabrics aren't always there. They have stepped up their game in the tailoring front, but there's nothing like some good investment tailoring pieces that you'll have for years to come. So it's no surprise that during the financial crisis of 2008, around 2010, we saw this sort of revival of good solid tailoring. So if you're going to invest in something, it's something that's going to last you for seasons to come. We saw that with designers such as Phoebe Philo when she was at Celine. Phoebe Philo, of course, launching her own collection. That's very exciting. So it's no surprise then that here we are in 2023, given the current economic situation, that we're also seeing a return to tailoring, a return to suits, a return to structure. That as it's fashion, it's never quite the same as it was before. I remember watching a talk from Faith Popcorn, who's a very famous trend predictor, and she says, fashion is repeats itself, but it's never quite the same. I love the fact that right now we've got a revival of secondhand, and there's so many amazing finds to be found secondhand. And that today we can revive vintage fashion, but it's about the way we mix it, the way we wear it, what we put it with, and what attitude we wear it with. This is quite fascinating. Love this trend. Anyway, back to the fashion shows. So we have seen a return of tailoring in this fashion week, which does very much echo that sort of similar financial situation that we were going through in 2008. So today, in a post-COVID, economically challenged environment, it's not quite the same as before. We're seeing structure, we're seeing minimalist, more simple pieces, also riding off the end of that sort of 90s revival that we've been having, and the YK2 revival that we've been having for a number of years now. It's for people my age and beyond. I remember when I used to borrow my mum's clothes from the 70s and think they were so cool, and now, of course, people my age, their daughters are borrowing our clothes from the 90s. It's quite strange. Again, subconsciously, I think I've put on my little 90s revival moment here today. And actually, I remember my mother had a velvet choker with a little pearl hanging off it that she gave to me once, and I broke the Velcro on the back. So maybe I got this not just as a 90s revival moment, but also because, we're very influenced by whoever raised us, aren't we? It's part of our style story, and the things that we're drawn to are often from our parents or from our grandparents or from fabulous aunties that come and visit, from the things that surrounded us. Anyway, that's so much of an aside. So there might be a revival of minimalism and of tailoring, but there's also this feeling of exuberance because we were all in confinement for so long in comfortable clothes, love comfortable clothes, but we also want to celebrate being alive. We want to celebrate dressing up. It's not an ostentatious exuberance. It's still quite subtle. We see that, for example, at Victoria Beckham. I have to confess, I absolutely love Victoria Beckham's past two collections that she's shown in Paris. It's real clothes for real women, even though she herself is, really quite slim. They do size up very well. The tailoring is lovely. The colour palettes, her use of colour, it's got such a great sensitivity without being outrageous. I love to buy Beckham for a lot of my clients. And also they do quite a lot of reductions. So in this season in Victoria Beckham, we saw tailoring with some feathers coming out. It's something that you can easily replicate as a styling trick if you've already got some great tailoring. Just this idea of mixing, not necessarily feathers, but something softer with something harder. This tailoring revival is not about power dressing in that 1980s sense, although we are seeing a lot of 1980s trends seemingly coming through with these sort of big shoulders, for example, at Yves Saint Laurent. I don't feel it's the same as before though. The shoulders today, yes, they're big, too big for me. I have petite shoulders, so I prefer a more fitted style. But we're seeing this sort of unstructured shoulder. It's unstructured, oversized tailoring. It's got a softness to it. And where it is very hard, where you have got some softer lurex tops, for example, at Saint Laurent, sort of sparkly tops, shiny tops with shoulder pads worn in. So let's just remember that the return of, the strong shoulder in a way. Maybe we might want to think about putting little shoulder pads underneath a t-shirt, for example, just to pep up some of our basics next season into autumn winter. But with the tailoring, it's also about having the softer fabrics, it's about mixing a structured jacket with something softer underneath. At Saint Laurent, we saw that with giant grey chiffon pussy bow blouses, for example. At Victoria Beckham, we see it with the stricter tailoring and then with these feather details that she's using. So how can we mix textures? You can also get trims of tape with little tiny feather detail at millinery supplies and haberdashery supplies that you could also just stitch or stick with a bit of toupee tape into the inside of your jacket or the sleeves, just to give that sort of trend-led touch to your existing tailoring pieces. So I love the fact that we're still celebrating leaving the house. We're not confined, thank goodness, anymore. We do want to dress up, but there's also this overshadowing feeling of the economy being in a bit of a difficult situation. We've got the war in the Ukraine. All is not jolly right now, and fashion is obviously reflecting that. My favourite show from Paris this season was the Hermes show. The creative director has cut her hair, and she said the collection was very much inspired by hairstyles. As some of you know, I'm from Polish heritage, and I remember when I was little growing up in the Polish church, a lot of the ladies would have this fabulous dyed hair, and they tended to be dyed in two colours. It was a kind of Bordeaux tinted coloured hair, or a sort of auburney, orangey coloured dyed hair, very synthetic coloured, but really rich and beautiful. I don't know if it was something to do with communism, if they had these two predominant hair colours, almost like a henna, a really rich colour. And so maybe it's my style story coming through, that I loved the Hermes show because it uses all of these beautiful, rich, autumnal colours of hair dye that I think you all know what I'm talking about. And actually, isn't it funny how, blue rinces and these sort of auburn coloured hairs were once the preserve of older ladies, and now they're de rigueur amongst the millennials. In Paris nowadays, you see plenty of young girls with wild blue coloured hair, for instance, lilac hair, a lilac rinse. So in the Hermes show, we saw rich shades of burgundy, Bordeaux, glittery, sparkly red, but all worn in a really understated manner, in a very realistic manner, and in very tonal outfits. And that's really a big trend that's coming through this season in the Paris fashion shows, is tonal dressing, which is something that's great for midlifers. Tonal dressing, especially with these very flattering colours like the Bordeauxs, like the navies, which are flattering to most skin tones and make a refreshing change from black, which, let's face it, isn't that flattering, especially if you're not wearing makeup, or your skin can go a bit grey, can't it, in midlife, and black can just sort of drain your colour. These rich colours, worn tonally, can look really sophisticated, can look really slimming, and relevant, especially for these coming seasons, especially when you're playing with textures like Nadège did in the Hermes show, where she's mixing hints of sparkle. And it's also a great way later on, when you get into the Christmas and the festive period, to have some of those more seasonally festive pieces that you can continue wearing into the new season this time next year. So beyond the tonal dressing, she also introduced a beautiful, rich colour palette of caramel colours. I'm remembering that toffee penny. Is it from Quality Street boxes? That giant toffee. I can't eat them anymore. It's not good for my teeth. I feel like everything's going to come out. But that exact colour, beautiful with the gold, just like the Quality Street wrapper, right? So let's be inspired by Quality Streets this season. The metallic red, I've forgotten what that one was. Is it the fudge? For a bit of red shimmer. The gold with the toffee colours, the caramel colours, beautiful colour palette. We're seeing that as well into accessories from a range of designers, from a kind of caramel coloured crocodile style shoes, are very popular, and handbags. And also, because we're talking a lot about tonal dressing, these colours blend really well with any of the chocolate brown colours that you might have invested in last season and the season before. Don't get rid of them, just mix them in to these softer shades that are going to keep you looking elegant and relevant through the next season. So because we're talking about tonal dressing, we are seeing more textures coming through. We're seeing a lot of leather, caramelly coloured leather, brown coloured leather, total leather looks in different shades of browns. We're also seeing suede handbags and quite normal, seemingly normal outfits, like a t-shirt, for example, but rendered in suede. So it's this form of discreet luxury, this new form of sort of soft power dressing, or powerful dressing, if you like, which feels much more up to date than just rehashing that old, the old tropes of masculinity into power dressing that we saw in the 1980s. Perhaps the show that references the 1980s the most this season is the Saint Laurent show from Anthony Vaccarello. There's one more show that I thought I'd talk about, and it's Loewe. Oh, I love Loewe. I love the brand. I've spoken about my passion for this brand before. So look out for all of these things: the return to new elegance, the unstructured, slouchy, cocoony, textural mix of tonal colours and delicious, yummy textures that we're going to be wearing.